Greetings, dear cinephiles and film lovers. It's your favorite duo, Timothy and Thomas, here to take you on another delightful journey through the world of cinema. Tonight, we are honored to delve into a cinematic behemoth, a colossal juggernaut, or rather, a big green guy with anger management issues, Hulk film.
Now,
before I hand it over to my trusty companion, Thomas, for his thoughts on this cinematic masterpiece, or perhaps not so much of a masterpiece, according to me, let me welcome you all warmly and invite you to join us in our spirited discussion.
Oh, Timothy, you old grump. How could you say that? Hulk film is a cinematic masterpiece. It's something special, at least. I mean, who doesn't love a good old Marvel movie about a scientist accidentally turning himself into a giant green monster? I mean, really, what could possibly go wrong? Now, before you start huffing and puffing like the Hulk himself, let me say that I do agree with some of your points. The CGI was a bit. Well, it's been a while since I watched it last, but I vaguely remember some not-so-realistic moments. But hey, we can forgive them for that, can't we? It was released in 2003, before the days of Marvel's glorious McHugh era. But enough about my old man ramblings, Timothy. What did you think about Hulk film? Did it make your heart grow 3 sizes like the Hulk himself? Or did it leave you feeling more like the Hulk's first target, smashed to bits and pieces?
Oh, Thomas, how can you even call it a masterpiece? I mean, sure, it had its moments, but overall Hulk film was a complete mess. The storyline was convoluted and hard to follow, with too many subplots and unnecessary side characters. And don't get me started on the acting. While Eric Bana did try his best as Bruce Banner Hulk, he just couldn't capture the essence of the character. As for Jennifer Connelly, she was, well, let's say she wasn't my favorite actress in this film. And what about Nick Nolte? His portrayal of General Thunderbolt Ross was, let's just say it didn't age well.
As for Ang Lee's direction,
I must admit that he tried something different with Hulk film, but it just didn't work for me. The constant cuts and camera angles were so distracting, I couldn't focus on the story at all. And let's not forget about the famous Hulk jump scene, which still makes me cringe to this day. It was like watching a poorly animated video game cutscene come to life. But perhaps the biggest disappointment of all was Hulk himself. I mean, how can you have a movie named after such an iconic character and barely show him? The fight scenes were few and far between, and when they did happen, they were over too quickly and lacked any real excitement or tension. It was more like watching a slow-paced choreographed dance than a brutal brawl between two titans. So in short, Thomas, while I do appreciate your love for Hulk film, I must respectfully disagree with you on this one. As for me, I'll stick with the McHugh versions of Hulk. At least they got his characterization right and gave us some truly memorable moments.
Ah, Timothy, my old friend, you always have to find something negative about everything. But let's not be too harsh on poor Ang Lee. He was just trying something new with Hulk film, and I applaud him for that. And as for the acting, while it may not have been Oscar-winning material, Eric Bana did a decent job given the circumstances. Plus, Jennifer Connelly was she had her moments, didn't she? And, speaking of Hulk himself, I must admit that his screen time could have been increased, but hey, we can't have everything, right? Besides, isn't the anticipation part of what makes a good superhero movie? We don't want to see too much of our hero too soon. But let's not dwell on the negatives. There were some bright spots in Hulk film, weren't there? I mean, who can forget that iconic scene where Bruce Banner finally transforms into Hulk for the first time? The music, the lighting, the raw emotions. It still gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. And what about the relationship between Bruce and Betty Ross? It was touching and heartfelt. A rare moment of humanity in an otherwise chaotic film. So all in all, while I don't consider Hulk film to be a cinematic masterpiece, I still think it had its moments. And hey, who knows? Maybe with some rewatches and the passing of time, my opinion might change. But what about you, Timothy? Do you have any interesting behind-the-scenes tidbits to share about Hulk film that might sway my opinion in the opposite direction?
Oh, Thomas, you are a persistent old soul, aren't you?
Well,
If you insist on digging up some dirt about Hulk film's production, I suppose I can oblige. One interesting tidbit that most people overlook is the infamous Hulk jump scene I mentioned earlier. You know, where Hulk leaps from one building to another.
well, according to set designs,
The jump should have been impossible. The buildings were too close together, and Hulk's landing spot simply didn't exist. However, the crew reportedly solved this little issue by using CG to create a completely digital environment around the actor. Can you believe it? They literally built a virtual city for one damn jump scene. Now that's dedication, or perhaps recklessness, depending on your point of view. But wait, there's more. Did you know that the famous Hulk rage scene was actually inspired by an incident involving director Ang Lee? It's true. During filming, reportedly lost his temper on set and smashed a camera equipment with a large piece of wood. The crew was understandably terrified, but instead of firing him on the spot, they decided to incorporate this accident into the movie, and voila, Hulk's iconic break room tantrum was born. Of course, they had to tone down the violence a bit for the film version, but the core idea remains intact. Sometimes even the most calm and collected individuals can lose their cool. Or in Hulk's case, his pants.
Oh, Timothy, you always have to find something negative about everything, don't you? But seriously, I remember hearing about that Hulk jump scene. It was quite the controversy back then, wasn't it? People were calling it CG fraud or something like that. But hey, what can we expect from a film industry still figuring out how to effectively blend practical effects with CG magic? I mean, look at us now. We have entire movies made entirely in the computer, and nobody bats an eye. But seriously though, Hulk film did pioneer some groundbreaking visual effects technique. The transformation scenes between Bruce Banner and Hulk were revolutionary for their time, and they still hold up pretty well today. And let's not forget about the iconic Hulk smash scene where Hulk, smashes his way out of that massive containment chamber. That was a real feat of visual effects wizardry. It took the talented teams at Ilm and Framestore months to create the CGI, destruction and digital environment that made that scene so memorable. But speaking of memories, Timothy, do you recall anything interesting about the original Hulk comics? I mean, they're not exactly known for their deep character development or complex storylines, but there must have been something that stood out to you when you first read them.
Well, Thomas, I must admit that while the original Hulk comics aren't known for their complex storylines or deep character development, they did introduce some iconic moments and characters that have been adapted to the big screen over time. For instance, there's the infamous Hulk rage mentioned earlier, where Bruce Banner transforms into an uncontrollable monster during times of extreme stress or anger. This concept was faithfully portrayed in the McHugh films, albeit with a more scientific twist. Another memorable aspect of the comics is Hulk's constant struggle with his dual identity. He's both the brilliant scientist Bruce Banner and the raging beast known as Hulk. This internal conflict was also portrayed in the McHugh films, albeit with more emphasis on Bruce's desire to control Hulk rather than simply accept his circumstances. However, one significant difference between the comics and the McHugh films is the treatment of the character Betty Ross. In the comics, she starts out as Bruce's love interest, but eventually becomes Hulk's wife, which was omitted in the McHugh adaptations. Instead, they chose to focus on the more complicated relationship between Bruce and Am. His cure for Hulk doctor, Betty Banner, played by Liv Tyler. But enough reminiscing about old comics, Thomas. Let's move on to the new version of Hulk film. Rumor has it they're going back to the original comic book roots and giving us a more faithful adaptation. What do you think? Are you excited to see how they'll bring these iconic characters and storylines to life in the modern era?
Yes, the cast. While I won't deny that Eric Bana was a bit of a disappointment as Bruce Banner Hulk, he did put in some decent performances when given material to work with. However, it was Jennifer Connelly who truly shined as Betty Ross. She brought depth and vulnerability to the character, making their relationship feel genuine despite its tragic outcome. And then there's the always brilliant Nick Nolte as Bruce's father, General Thunderbolt Ross. His performance was nothing short of magnetic, combining a mix of arrogance, fear, and unwavering determination. Even Sam Elliott, who played General Ross' right-hand man, managed to steal some scenes with his gruff charm. But perhaps the real highlight of Hulk film was the voice acting. David Kaye, who provided the iconic roar for the titular character, captured the essence of the character perfectly. And while I appreciate that Ang Lee wanted to give Hulk more depth and humanity by having him speak in full sentences rather than grunts, it did take some getting used to hearing a deep voice come out of a green-skinned behemoth. But hey, that's just me being picky about details. In the end, I think the cast did a commendable job given the material they had to work with. Now, Timothy, what do you think? Any favorite performances or moments from the actors in Hulk film?
Well, Thomas, while I agree that some of the performances were decent enough considering the lackluster script, there were a few glaring issues for me. First off, Eric Bana just couldn't nail the character of Bruce Banner Hulk. Don't get me wrong, he tried his best with what little material he was given, but it simply wasn't enough to bring these iconic characters to life. He lacked both the intelligence and the raw emotional intensity that we've come to expect from Bruce Banner, while his portrayal of Hulk was more like a raging beast than a truly dangerous monster. Now, don't get me wrong, I know Ang Lee wanted to give Hulk more depth and humanity, but in my humble opinion, he went too far in that direction. As for Jennifer Connelly as Betty Ross, while she did bring some much-needed emotional complexity to the film, her character arc felt rushed and underdeveloped. I understand they were trying to establish a love triangle between Bruce, Betty, and General Thunderbolt Ross, but it didn't quite work in this version of Hulk film. And speaking of Nick Nolte, while he did deliver an entertaining performance as the over-the-top villain, his accent choices were, let's just say they left a lot to be desired. But despite these shortcomings, there were some bright spots in Hulk film, namely the voice acting and the action sequences. As I mentioned earlier, David Kaye did an excellent job capturing the essence of the iconic character with his powerful roars and growls. And while the actual fight scenes were few and far between, when they did happen, they were executed well enough to keep us engaged. So all in all, while the acting certainly wasn't Oscar-winning material, it had its moments. Now, Thomas, what do you think? Any other thoughts or observations about the cast of Hulk film? While we're on the topic of artistic influences, Thomas, I can't help but notice some subtle nods to classic films throughout Hulk film. For example, there's a scene where Bruce Banner is running through the streets of city name, and it feels almost like a homage to the famous runaway train sequence from Alfred Hitchcock's classic thriller. Vertigo. The use of long takes, pop shots, and chaotic camera work all contribute to creating an intense chase scene that leaves the audience breathless. But perhaps one of the most overt homages in Hulk film is the final fight sequence between Hulk and General Ross on top of the specific location, which draws heavily from Akira Kurosawa's masterpiece, The Seven Samurai. The slow motion, dramatic music, and even some of the camera angles used in this scene are direct nods to Kurosawa's influential work.
Now,
I know some purists might argue that Hulk isn't a traditional samurai story, but insert your own witty remark here. I think Ang Lee successfully blended elements from these classic films with the comic book source material to create a unique and memorable cinematic experience. What do you think, Thomas? Did you notice any other references or homages in Hulk film that stuck out to you?
Oh, Timothy, you know me, I always notice the little details. You're right about those nods to classic films, especially the, Vertigo reference. But what really caught my eye was the use of color throughout Hulk film. In fact, the entire film is dominated by two primary colors, green and gray. Green represents Hulk himself, his rage, and his primal nature. Gray, on the other hand, represents Bruce Banner's scientific mind, his intelligence, and his struggle to control his transformation. But there's one scene in particular that really stands out for me. It's when Bruce finally accepts his fate as Hulk, and he walks through a field of purple flowers. The contrast between the bright purple blooms and the mostly monochromatic palette used in the film is very intentional. Purple, being a mix of red and blue, represents the balance that Bruce must achieve between his human and his monstrous side. And it's after this scene that we see the transformation of Hulk. Film into something more than just a mindless action flick. It becomes a tale about accepting oneself, embracing your flaws, and learning how to control your inner demons. Or at least that's what I got from it. What about you, Timothy? Any other artistic influences or hidden symbolism in Hulk film that caught your attention?
Well, Tom, while I can appreciate some of the artistic influences and performances in Hulk film, overall it falls short for me. The storytelling is messy at best, and the CG, while impressive for its time, hasn't aged gracefully. However, if you're a diehard fan of the comics or just a general action movie enthusiast, Hulk film might offer some moments of entertainment, but don't say I didn't warn you. Now, before we wrap up this week's episode of Tim and Tom's Film Nights, I'd like to remind our viewers that we do appreciate your comments, subscriptions, and likes. And remember, if you enjoyed our discussion, feel free to share this video with your friends and loved ones who also have a thing for superhero films, regardless of their opinion on Hulk film. Until next time, everyone.
Thank you, Timothy. And that concludes our in-depth analysis of Hulk film. Enjoyed revisiting this classic and discussing it with my dear old friend. But, seriously, folks, we do love hearing from you all. So don't hesitate to leave a comment below. Let us know what you thought about Hulk film or any other superhero films that we should tackle next. And if you enjoyed our insightful banter and want to see more, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell icon to be notified when we post new videos. Oh, and don't forget to give us a thumbs up and share this video with your friends on social media. We appreciate it more than you could ever comprehend. See you all next time for another installment of Tim and Tom's Film Nights.